is Lauren, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a very special interview. In this interview, I talked to Cheyenne, a 24-year-old who is just absolutely incredible. She's so well spoken and just truly was a delight to talk to. I'm filming this intro after just getting off the call, and I'm like genuinely delighted. I feel like I just got off the call with like a friend because he is just so personable and, to me, extremely relatable, and I think that a lot of you guys are going to be able to relate to her as well. Cheyenne grew up in a Baptist church, and she grew up queer, visually impaired, and with OCD, religious OCD. If you guys have watched a lot of my videos, you might have heard me mention that I myself have OCD, and it's something that bothered me a lot more when I was in the church, but you'll learn more about that as you hear the interview. Both Cheyenne will share her story and you'll hear more about mine. As you can imagine, growing up in a fundamentalist religious system would impact you in a lot of ways, and especially somebody like Cheyenne who has religious OCD, mental health problems. She is a lesbian and she's disabled. All of these issues can complicate your relationship to faith, church, and God. Cheyenne is just absolutely incredible, so I don't want to keep you guys from the interview too much longer. I'm just going to let us jump right into it. For this interview, we did decide to keep the cameras off and just give you guys audio only, so I'll be jumping back in at the end to kind of debrief with you and talk a little bit more about what you heard in the interview. But otherwise, sit back and relax. I'm going to put some ambient waves in the background and you can just listen to our interview. If you take nothing else away from this, if you don't make it through the whole video, I think my one hope is just that you guys share as much love with Cheyenne as possible, because she is incredibly brave for coming on here and being vulnerable. And I just want to say that I am incredibly grateful to Cheyenne for being willing to share her story with me. Let's jump into it.
Growing up, the church I went to was incredibly strict. It was incredibly small, incredibly tight-knit, incredibly strict. All of the women had really long hair that they wore up in buns, and they had the denim skirt, and they had the long button-down blouses. My involvement was that my grandparents were both Sunday school teachers for 30 years. My grandpa drove the church bus to pick up people for like vacation Bible school and whatnot. And I went with them whenever I could because I wanted to spend time with my grandparents, and I loved them, and I adored them. I went usually Sunday morning for sure, and then Sunday evening and Wednesday night. And I went from the time that I was a baby until I was probably 13. It was a very, very small church. I mean, when I say small, I mean at some points they had 80 people, and at others they had 30. TV was no go. Certain books, secular music, no go. Even sports, like my grandpa really liked sports, and if it was deemed a distraction from God and from church, then that was, not acceptable. And for a long time, I really enjoyed it because the church was run by my family, or people who were so close to my family that they might as well be. Faith, for me, especially in those early years, was a comfort because I am blind. And they would say things like, well, maybe God will work something out for you. Maybe, there'll be some miracle surgery or miracle technology or something that will make your life easier. So in the early years, it was a very comforting thing. And also my parents were off and on arguing, and so it gave me structure when I needed structure. It gave me a place to land when I needed a place to land. And most importantly, it allowed me to connect with my family, my grandparents especially, who, like I said, I really admired and loved. So for me, it was more about, okay, this is a social thing. I get to spend time with just me and them. And maybe I don't actually have to adapt to my disability. Maybe I can just, you know, be something else. God can make me something else, which, looking back on it, is such a sad way for me to have been raised up. But, I think that people thought that they were saying the best thing that they could at the time to comfort me.
Yeah. So you would say that they definitely intended for you to interpret that as the potential for there to be healing.
Yeah, but not in the faith healing sort of way, in the sort of way that's like, um, more something will come along that will open opportunities for you in the world. But also, when you die, you'll have a perfect body, and then none of this will even matter anyway. So that was another tenet of it, and an aspect of it that, really kind of stuck with me for a long time. I also felt very restricted and stifled, even at a very young age, because let's say I wanted to listen to a certain book or a song or something, I wasn't allowed to do that. It was very, very taught upon that the world was this terrible place and people were inherently wicked. There's this really famous Bible verse about it. I always had a different view on that. I didn't want to believe that people were inherently wicked and people were inherently sinful and the world was all evil.
Mhm.
I wanted to believe that the world was complicated and some people were terrible, but some people were lovely. And so I think that I've always had disagreements there, or I was strongly discouraged from doing that. And so I was often told, these are things that are acceptable, these are things that are not. And the world outside is wrong and sinful and evil. And, they're going to try to convince you that, it's okay, but really it's not. I was confused because I felt very safe and secure in that environment, and I knew exactly what to say and how to please people. But also, I felt very foreign and alien because I had these things I wanted to do from a very early age that were forbidden. I had grown up hearing about the gay agenda. When QAnon came along in 2021 or 2020, whatever, it was not a surprise to me because I grew up hearing how such and such politician was evil and this is what the gays want to do to everyone. And, there was a time when we were driving home from church one day and my grandpa tells me, there are some sins that are really bad. Did you know that it was homosexuality that led to the fall of the Roman Empire and all these things? Looking back on it, it is absurd, but as a kid who doesn't know much about history at the time, I didn't know what to believe. And it's just what I grew up believing. And so to internalize that as a child, it really sticks with you. And it has come back to haunt me in my adulthood and influence how I go through the world and how I relate to my sexuality. I have a hard time being open about it. So hearing how this seemed to be the sin that people were fixated on for me put it into my mind that I am somehow more more sinful than the average sinner,
Mm.
and that I was also inherently inappropriate to be around because you know they had this whole idea about gay people being you know inappropriate. There was a couple. They were two people who had been married previously. They both had children and then they got divorced. And then a couple years passed, they met, they fell in love at the church. Everyone commented on how in love they were. But they went to the pastor and they said, "We want to get married." And the pastor said to them, "You guys have both been divorced before. So I don't think that you guys should remarry."
Mm.
And I was probably like 7 or 8 at this time, and I knew both of them, and I saw how they interacted with each other. And so they didn't end up marrying each other. And I just remember thinking, like, that's not right. That's not right. They should have been allowed to do that. I don't understand why you would tell people who care about each other not to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the first inkling that I had that maybe I had different views. I stopped attending because I moved to Nevada, which it it was not the place I wanted to be at the time, and I, still probably don't want to be there, but it had the benefit of removing me from this environment that, okay, I don't have to be here anymore if I don't want to. And at the time I was 12 or 13, I began to realize that maybe I don't want to.
In the church and with your family, were you open with them about your sexuality, or did you keep quiet about it
Um,
in light of, the kind of comments about it, like things saying that it caused the fall of the Roman Empire?
well, I was always like, that seems a bit much, Grandpa. And my grandpa at the time was like, oh no, look it up, look it up. I was not open with them because they would constantly be like, you're going to be someone's wife, you're going to have a kid, this is your life, this is your destiny. So I wasn't really, for the first half of my life, I didn't really uh, know any better enough to say anything. But then when I started to realize that I was lesbian, I was like, they would be like, oh, don't you want a husband? And I'd be like, no. And I wouldn't say anything else. I would just say no. Don't you want to be a wife? No. Don't you want to have kids? No. It was easier for me to pretend that I was really devout and that I just wanted to focus on God and focus on church and focus on my schoolwork and not have any sort of connections at all, rather than having to be honest. I really dove into, well, I'm just super devout. And I would never do something as inappropriate as kiss a boy when really that was the last thing I wanted to be doing anyway. I knew fully that I was a lesbian very early on. Um, but I was just like, well, my family is never going to know. I'll just tell them that I'm super into school or super into God, and then they'll never ask me questions, and I'll just have the reputation of being like the spinster who's like the fun aunt who never got married, and nobody will say anything. This can surely last years and years, and I won't develop a reputation. It'll be fine. Which, of course, ended up not being the case. When I actually came out of the closet, basically everyone knew. It happened over a period of years. I mean, I feel like everyone wants there to be a linear, this is when I came out moment, but it was more like sort of quiet quitting with religion for me. It's just, I just slowly started to pull back. I slowly started to drop hints and just, oh, do you want to get married? Do you have a boyfriend? Are you interested in anyone? No, no, no. And then by the time that I started to tell people in earnest, like by the time that me and my partner got together, which is when I fully emerged, everyone sort of suspected, and they were just waiting for the penny to drop. As far as a place in the church, absolutely not.
Mm.
No. There was not even a question of, oh, maybe they'll accept me. No. No. If I walked in there holding my girlfriend's hand, they probably wouldn't say anything to me, but they definitely would have had like a breakdown afterward. After I left, they probably would have all prayed for me. And I remember one of my cousins ended up being trans, and they had a bulletin with his name on it, and they said, "Pray for our child. They've been lost to us," and they would pass around bulletins of other people's children who have been lost. And so I knew I was probably going to end up on a bulletin sometime. Uh, I don't know if I have or not.
That's
Never found
yeah.
that out.
That's really interesting. That's definitely not something that I had experienced while I was at the church, and that sounds almost like funeral-esque in a way, like very yeah, very I would not want to be
Just,
on a flyer
I
either.
don't want to be on a flyer. No,
You're not missing.
I'm not missing. I'm just gay.
Um,
Having religious obsessions from a very early age, not that I knew what they were. Um, the church I attended believed in thought crime and believed that God knew everything all the time, which I took very, very literally. Um, so when other people were telling white lies, it would really distress me. Like, I remember one time I threw like a frisbee over the fence and it got lost. And I didn't tell the teacher because I was afraid I was going to get in trouble. And I was thinking about that one lie, that one stupid white lie for weeks, wondering if I should come clean and confess. Thought crime is basically if you think something that can be considered a sin, that means that you've already done it because you wanted to do it in your heart. So, I mean, there's a classic example, like if you look at a woman with lust, you've already, been with her in your heart. And so things like that. But I took it to an extreme. So, if I thought, oh man, I hate my mom, I felt like I had to pray 3 times over and over again. I always like to say that I read the Bible all the way through a million times, but I never got past the Old Testament because I would listen to it on audio because I'm blind, and if I wasn't paying attention to every single word of every single verse, then I had to go back to the beginning of the chapter and start over.
I completely relate to that. Like then you didn't actually read it, so it would be lying to say you read the whole Bible, so you have to start.
Exactly. I mean, I probably read the amount of words in there, but I think I got stuck on numbers a bunch of times.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was going back, repeating things over and over for me. I would have a prayer that I would have to do each night as soon as I laid in bed because I was afraid that I wasn't going to wake up in the morning because of God striking me down or the world ending because I was having sinful thoughts. And these sinful thoughts, I have to stress, were like the most benign sins you've ever heard of in your life. But they didn't my brain takes everything and puts it on the same level. So someone stealing a car is the same as me stealing a candy bar, you know.
Yeah. I
And
think
I
it
think that that's
definitely is exacerbated by for at least for me, it was the verse that says that all sin is equal in the eyes of God.
yeah,
Like, well,
yeah,
God says
that's
it's
exactly it.
equal.
That's exactly it. So to be gay was equally as bad as being a murderer. It's all the same. Because clearly there's no difference there. I would have these rituals that I would have to do. I would like tap, this is so stupid. I would like tap on the status bar of my phone 3 times. And if I didn't do it, then I had to start over and I had to open like certain drawers of my room a couple different times every single night. Otherwise, I was sinning, I was going to be going to hell. And anytime that I felt the urge to participate in like popular culture things, and I felt like I had to pray again 3 times because I don't know, that's my magic number or something.
There
Oh,
anything, any specific obsessions or fears that you experienced that triggered you or anyone around you to say, hey, maybe this could actually be religious OCD? Or when did that end up coming to light for you?
I kept all of my compulsions to myself, and there was a lot of them. I'm just scratching the surface here, but I had a lot around the end of the world, and I would do these ridiculous things, these seemingly these seemingly unrelated things to prevent it. And I learned how to keep them inside. I learned how to internalize them, to stop the outward compulsions and turn them all inward. Um, so that's just constantly seeking reassurance and checking and researching and all of these things. Um, what actually ended up happening, because I had never even heard of religious OCD, what actually ended up happening was that my OCD went away for a while and then came back with a vengeance in my 20s, early 20s. But this time it was religious OCD mixed with harm OCD. And it ruined my life, basically. I couldn't do anything, couldn't talk to people, had a really hard time doing a lot of things that I like to do. And I knew that something was wrong at that point. It took my partner, Finley, basically kind of sitting me down and being like, hey, maybe this is something that you can relate to. You talk about your childhood a lot, and I noticed that it kind of reminds me of this like religious scrupulosity thing. Do you think that could have anything to do with what you're dealing with now? Um, and I thought maybe it could, maybe, who knows? But I could not discuss my thoughts because I thought that they were so silly and so out there. I mean, I had one thought where I wasn't allowed to smile or laugh or eat food until my parents came home because if I did any of those things, they would die, or God would take them up in the rapture and leave me behind. So, these things I felt like I could not discuss with anybody for a long time. It took me years, years. And then finally, it got so bad and it was so devastating and debilitating that I was like, I have to talk to somebody about this. And so a year ago, I ended up mentioning it to my therapist, and she was like, oh my God. And I was like, don't say that. No. I was like, um, she was like, yeah, go get assessed. And so I did. And it turns out that I've had OCD my whole life and had no idea. But it all started with religious obsessions and morphed.
Yeah, I think for me, the hard thing about religious OCD is that a lot of it was backed through misinterpreted scripture or misapplied scripture that I
Right.
used. So I did think that it was valid, and then other people outside of me, inside of my church, would also validate it with those verses. So it was getting backed up. So I felt like it was very rational. And then the other types of OCD thoughts that I dealt with, I was like, well, I know that they're irrational, so it's not a problem because I know that they're irrational. It just makes me feel better to do XYZ. So I do it, but I know that it's crazy.
I had the exact same experience because my every single day that I went to church, they would talk about the end of the world. And their whole thing was anyone could die at any time, or the rapture could come at any time. We are living in the end times. This is it, folks. Strap in, basically. Show's over. And so it felt, talking to these people, like this was a normal thing to fear.
Mhm.
It was just like, fearing a dog or fearing to go, on a roller coaster or something. It was equally valid to any normal fear, like you said, because it's coming from outside of us. It's coming from the environment around us. It is being held up as the inarguable truth that these people have based their entire worlds around.
Yeah.
And I remember every single time I went on a car ride with my grandparents, they would be like, "Dear Jesus, hope we don't die on the way. Anyway, have a good day. Let's go." And for them, they were able to brush it off. But for me, because I have an OCD brain, I'm sitting there in the car ride thinking, this is it. This is the last drive I'll ever take. I gotta pray the whole way there, otherwise it's it. Yeah, it's over. It's crazy the way that I suffered in silence and had no idea what was happening, or that it was abnormal at all. That scripture, forget what it is now, but it's like, the heart is desperately wicked above all things, who can know it, or something like that. It's been a long time, and it led me to think that I was an inherently evil person, and that other people are inherently evil people, which eventually led me to developing harm OCD thoughts, because I would just get this horrible idea that, oh, well, maybe I would do this horrible thing if there was no moral code to stand in my way, which of course is ridiculous because it's completely opposite to my character, and but again, it feels real when you're living in it and when you're being validated that this is true, this is true, this is true by everyone that you respect and love. Another one, again, is the rapture and the end times. That was a big teaching. I mean, it was in every sermon. And when you grow up hearing that the world is going to end, you suddenly think that prayer, and also the power of prayer. So, like, prayer can save lives, and prayer can heal the body, and prayer can do all this. So, when you grow up hearing about the power of prayer, and also that the world is going to end, you are going to probably develop magical thinking if you have OCD, which I did. The idea magical thinking is that you can change the physical reality of the world based on your thoughts. Your thoughts have actual impact on what happens around you. So I think those were the most detrimental to me personally. For me, it led me to not take risks. It led me to the idea that I had committed sins led me to feel like I was constantly in the wrong, which led me to compulsively apologize, compulsively try to find the thing that would make people the most comfortable with me. To an extent that I actually put myself in really harmful situations because I was not able to determine what was safe and what was not. Mainly, though, it made me incredibly terrified of anyone leaving me at any time to do anything outside the house. I became, in my 20s, very agoraphobic, and it took me a long time to feel safe leaving the house. It took me a long time to feel safe, not only leaving the house, but leaving the house by myself and doing things independently. I still can't go into church without getting terrible intrusive thoughts. Like, any kind of thing that you could think of, if I go into a church, that's what I'm thinking of. It's terrible. Can't do it. But even on Sundays, I have a hard time on Sundays because we weren't allowed to buy things on Sunday. We weren't allowed to watch a lot of movies on Sunday, or do anything blasphemous at all. And that seemed like a special day to me. It seemed like a holy day. And if I did a sin on Sunday, it seemed a lot worse somehow. There are times when I feel like I can't live my life with my partner and do things that make me happy and go places because it's a Sunday. It's just a lot of little things that stack up to being this big mountain that I'm constantly climbing every day. And every day I feel like I wake up at the bottom, but every day I know that I'm getting a step closer to the top. It's just a lot of work that I've had to put in to make myself do everyday tasks. Receiving a diagnosis really changed my life, which is why I really wanted to talk about it because I did not know what OCD was. I was under the apprehension that it was the cleaning thing
Yeah.
for a long time. It wasn't until it was pointed out to me that I fit a lot of the criteria that I began to really feel for the first time ever that I was not inherently sinful, that I was just a person with a mental illness who is struggling, but who is working through it and getting better. And so for me, it was everything. It was everything because I could finally contextualize all of the thoughts that I have had throughout my life at various points and make sense of them and start sorting through, okay, this is Cheyenne, this is me, this is my OCD thought. I am a generally very positive person who has a lot of optimism about things. My OCD, based on my religious teachings, told me that I wasn't, and that I generally love the world and new experiences and learning about other people. My OCD is a limiting factor, always stemming back to the things I was taught growing up.
Yeah.
So for me, it just completely validated every experience that I've had and made my life make so much more sense.
Yeah.
And took away a lot of the shame that I felt for having what I was always told were overreactions to the teachings. Because everyone else didn't get as upset and didn't take them as literally as I did. But I finally was able to find other people who experienced the same thing, and it just meant the world to me.
Before you were diagnosed with OCD, did you ever attribute your OCD to the voice of God?
Yes. Yeah. Well, more like the voice of the devil, because my OCD always said terrible things. And so I thought, oh, I'm being tempted into sin, when really it was just me having terrible intrusive thoughts that I was constantly distressed by. It would be like something like, oh, I'd be with my grandparents at church and they said, oh, why don't you curse into the microphone really loud?
Yeah.
you know? And it was terrifying to me because I knew that I would get in trouble, or I'd be sitting there in church and they'd be like, I would have the thought that's like, you should say how much you hate it here and that you hate the Bible and you hate God or something like that. I'd be sitting there and have a voice like that. And so I just thought, oh man, this is sin. This is sin. And I'm being tempted into sin, but I'm being really good because I don't want to sin. I want to be good and not say anything like that out loud ever. I never told anyone about these thoughts because I was so ashamed of them. But if I had really opened up and told people what I was thinking, they would have said, you are facing down some demons. And I don't know exactly what they would have done, but I think they would have been disturbed. Knowing that really hurts because I was a good kid. Spiritual warfare was a huge topic as far as them. Everything was a demon in disguise or the devil at work or trying to come out of the woodwork to get you. Wolf in sheep's clothing, the world and all of its people were, and felt like I was constantly fighting a battle in my head of good versus evil, right versus wrong. Me versus my OCD thoughts, basically. And it wore me out. It wore me out to the point that, I was eventually, even years after I left the church, I was exhausted. I felt like I had lived a million lifetimes by the time I was 22, you know.
Did you return to church after you were 13, or was that when you stopped going and
I did return to the church. I actually volunteered there as a teenager, knowing I was a lesbian. I go there occasionally still because my grandparents, to this day, still work at that church. They still work at it. And my relationship with my family is very contentious, but I still have a lot of love for them. And I have gone back with my partner, actually. We just pretended to be friends, I guess. And we went back, and she was like, "This is crazy. I didn't know people were like this outside of the movies." And I was like, "Yeah, this is good old family church." So I didn't realize that there was a lot of progressive churches under the same denomination until I grew up and moved away and talked to people about it. And they would ask, "Oh, what kind of church did you go to?" And I would tell them, and they would be like, "And that was conservative?" And I was like, "Yeah."
What was your relationship like with your family as you started to pull away from your faith?
I think you probably have experienced the same thing, and I'd be curious to know. They would say things like, "Oh, well, you were a lot happier when you were a Christian," because I was depressed, because I knew that I would eventually have to pull back from my family as a whole to know this and still be close to them and still want a relationship with them is a really hard thing to grow up knowing. It really twists you up inside because the whole time you're looking at them like, when is my welcome mat going to roll away? When are you going to close the door? When are you going to start seeing me like you see all of the other sinners that you pray for in front of me? Those were the questions I had to grapple with. And as I grew up, there were two me's. There was the me that I presented to my family, and then there was the me that is the true me that, I developed when I was with people who cared about me. And eventually, I ended up having to step back from my family mostly. That's been a hard thing. What ended up leading to that was like I said, a million little things. It ended up being a million little things. And then the final thing was just the constant lack of acknowledgement of my relationship. And I felt like, you know what? I'm 24. This is ridiculous. If you're not going to acknowledge a part of my life that's so important to me, then I don't really feel like I want to be in yours. It's been hard, but at the same time, I think that it's the right call to do. It's a really hard thing. And it's not a decision that you make lightly or you make all at once. For me, just like leaving the church, it was a slow, gradual inevitability that I knew was coming. It honestly felt like my personal rapture. Like I knew I was in the end days and I was just waiting for that final trumpet call to sound, and then I was going to leave that situation.
Throughout this, you've talked about your vision impairment, and I wanted to ask how the church's attitude towards disability impacted you.
I think that it can be comforting for people when you think that there's going to be this magical cure for your disability. And I think that for me growing up, I really wanted it. That's kind of what drew me to the church, is that I wanted that cure. And I thought if I prayed enough, if I sang hard enough, if I participated in the events enough, then maybe I could manifest something. Maybe I could bring something into the existence for myself. Maybe God would help me. What that did, though, instead, was have me not be able to sit with my blindness, not be able to learn how to live with it until I was much, much older, which put me back because I was always waiting on a savior. Pardon the pun. I was always waiting on the savior. I was waiting on something to change. And when that didn't happen, it led to a lot of grief and not accepting myself and not learning how to love myself for myself. I've had to really learn self-love and really learn how to embrace my disability as an adult instead of learning it as a child, because I felt like the people around me were really banking on, oh, this isn't going to be your whole life. And I had to ask myself the question of, like, what if it is, though? And it's still going to be a good one, even though it's not the life that they told me I should have. Really grapple with that and sit with it, not try to fix myself. That's been a really big struggle.
Something that is really common in churches is toxic positivity and wanting you to just find the joy and not talk about any kind of hardships. Is that something that you noticed when it came to any of these topics?
Oh, yes, definitely. If I was bitter because I couldn't do an activity or because something wasn't accessible to me, if I was upset, it was always like, well, give it to God. God will make things better for you, and you can find joy in the Lord and things like that. That's not really validating to my personal lived experience. When I had mental health struggles, when I was a teenager, I would tell people, because my OCD was pretty bad then. It kind of flares up and down in my life, but it was bad when I was a teenager. And I would tell people, hey, I think I'm depressed or stressed out or something. I think I should get some help. And they're just like, well, why don't you try prayer again? You haven't done that in a while, you know? And it was like, that's not what I needed at the time. I needed something that was more tangible in my life. It left me feeling like expressing any hardship was letting everyone down. You can live with a disability, you can be LGBT, you can have a mental illness. The people around you can make or break you as far as their responses to it. The response is everything. If a person comes to you with these problems, instead of trying to make it better for them, instead of turning to spirituality, it's okay to just sit with them in their discomfort and their sadness and their, depression or their feelings, whatever they might be, and validate that and actually listen to them. And that's what I think that I wish that someone had done to me, is instead of trying to sweep everything under the rug of prayer and of positivity and of God, I wish that someone had just said, you know what, Cheyenne, I will hear you, I will listen to you, I will try to work something out to help you. I think that that's something that I would want. And then after that, if you still want to do the religious thing, do it. Absolutely no spirituality for me.
Yeah.
I can't do it. It's too much of a trigger for my OCD at this point. I don't know if I ever really want to try to go back there. And I don't think I have a real strong inclination to explore that side of myself, you know?
And I can definitely relate. I go back to church sometimes when I visit my family. My little brother
Yeah.
is a worship pastor, and my dad is, he's always served in some capacity on the board or something like that, an executive pastor. And
Mhm.
it is difficult to go back once, or twice a year. And definitely anything more than that, I think, would be very difficult for me. And to answer your question earlier about my own leaving the church with my parents, part of the reason that I left was because my OCD specific to religion had gotten so bad that I was having panic attacks at church and I wasn't able
Yeah.
to go anymore. They were not supportive of me leaving the church. And so what I ended up doing is that I just ended up scheduling work over every single Sunday, Wednesday, or because that was when we had our youth group. So they were more accepting of that. And then I tried to continue to dabble in religion in college, in early adulthood, but I've ultimately kind of landed in the same place as you. I would say I'm an agnostic atheist, and definitely, even if I was still a believer, I think that I would struggle to be in a church atmosphere. I think that I would have to find some modified version of religion for myself.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I have the same experience and I had panic attacks too. I didn't know that they were panic attacks, but my stomach would hurt. I would feel restless and I felt like my heart was going to pop out of my chest. And eventually it became such a stressor that even the thought of going back once a year became overwhelming. And I could not go back without like my partner or someone in my corner that I felt comfortable around enough to be like, okay, you're my safe person, and I can go and I can like squeeze your hand or something because I can't do this.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I think that one of my values is like clear logic, and my OCD tries to make me feel like everything is an omen. And I think that that's something, that OCD really does is make everything feel more significant than it already feels.
Yeah.
And so for me, I don't think that I will ever be able to either actually do or want to do any sort of spiritual thing because my OCD already makes everything into an omen anyway. So for me, I really value that clear-minded, facts-based thinking.
Yeah.
That brings me a lot of comfort. Honestly, the right partner, the right friends, the right community around me, I don't know what I would do without my partner and their family and it's just the people who have embraced me for me. I don't have to put on a show. I don't have to be anything other than me. I can just be exactly who I am. I don't have to compartmentalize parts of my life. I can just do whatever I feel is right for me. And having that freedom is so new and important to me and special. It's uncomparable. It's extraordinary and wonderful and beautiful. I really love my cats. um and I really like learning who I am without religion, who I am without OCD, dictating everything I do all day long, and watching my personality bloom now when it's been lost for so many years. The biggest challenges is honestly trying to explain it to other people.
Yeah.
How can I explain to other people that I'm thinking about the fact that I didn't pray today randomly for no reason Or how can I explain to people that I'm having a really bad harm thought? Or that I'm afraid the world is going to end? How can I explain to someone that I don't want to go out because I'm afraid to leave the house and it's not anything to do with them, it's all to do with me? For me, it's sort of, how do I relate to other people? How do I relate to myself? And making a lot of allowances for myself, my younger self, because I'm really hard on her, and realizing that all of my experiences were not abnormal, and making space for that. And you know those have been really some things I'm working on, because a part of me still believes in that perfectionism, perfect emotion, no mental health struggles at all sort of life.
Yeah.
So making allowances for some days, I will have no bad thoughts and I can do whatever I want and it's perfectly fine. And some days I can't get out of bed, and that's okay. That's been really hard to accept, that it's okay.
I can definitely relate to all of that, and the difficulty of accepting a certain level of anxiety is just going to be in your life
Yeah.
because, yeah, previously in the church with mental health, we definitely believe that God could and would heal you. And so
Hmm.
I, didn't know it was OCD, but I knew it was anxiety or
Yeah.
something wasn't right. And I definitely did think that someday I would be able to just bootstrap, have the right attitude, or have God's peace or the joy of the Lord, and that I would be able to just, not have any sort of mental health problems. And so
Yeah.
it's definitely been interesting accepting like this is just going to be a part of my life and that is okay. And in some ways that's been really difficult, but then in other ways it's been very freeing too, because then if I have a bad day, I'm not panicking going, oh my God, this shouldn't happen, this is
Yeah.
a big problem. I can just go, okay, it's a bad day, I'm going to take it easier today.
Yeah.
So I'm able to have a
Oh,
little bit more grace for myself now that I know what it is and can name it.
yeah, I agree. Have you tried drinking water or taking a walk outside?
I actually have, if you would believe that.
Or
But
taking it to the Lord?
no, but I feel like honestly, it's funny that you do say that because I feel like, I was in therapy throughout, all of my early life and I was just diagnosed officially, this year. And so I looking back, I feel like that is the advice that I pretty much got from therapists and,
Yeah.
help books. Like legitimately, I know it's a joke, but that truly is like the best help out there. And it does help to a degree, but yeah, getting the proper diagnosis really changed everything.
For me, the proper diagnosis, doing like ERP, exposure response prevention therapy, and then medication has been a life changer for me.
Yeah.
And and it really allows me to be calm in my body, in myself, and allows me to sit with things so much better. And with a lot of these fundamentalist churches, they will tell you, oh, don't get diagnosed. And if you go on mental health medication, it's the worst thing ever for you, and this and that.
Yeah.
But without them, without both of those things, and in working together, um, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I don't know where I would be today. I don't know what my life would look like today. I know that I probably wouldn't be as functional as I am, and I wouldn't be as happy and fulfilled as I am. And that is a real gift that the world gave to me, is that now I can look forward to things. I can admit that I'm hopeful, which felt like such a wrong thing to do before. To admit out loud to someone else that I feel hope, that I feel like things are going to be okay, is such a relief. It's such a relief. And I want that for other people.
Yeah.
You don't have to do this big dramatic thing where you sit your family down and you're like, I'm leaving the church. And you don't have to come out that way either, because chances are you're going to come out to people one by one, two by two. And some of them will probably say, honey, we already knew. And that's annoying. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to do anything. You can sit there in church and daydream and be somewhere else and not pay attention to things if you need to. If you're in a community, in any community, church or not, and it's making you feel worse to be there instead of better and happier, I think it's worth looking at that community objectively and saying, is this really what people say it is in my life, or is this an anchor bringing me down? And really evaluating that for yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's what I basically did. And I realized once I didn't have to go, that it was only love holding me there, but also sometimes that was holding me back as well.
Yeah.
So it's about finding things that make you feel better instead of worse, comfortable instead of upset, and hopeful instead of fearful.
Yeah, and finding a community that is, supporting you back. I think you said it was your love that was keeping you there, and I think that's it was your love, not the love that you were receiving. Even if people were trying to give you love, it was hurting you at the end of the day.
And contrary to what a lot of religion teaches, love should not be hurtful. If that is the case, that's not what we want to look out for. I give very tip of the iceberg examples of what an intrusive thought is like, or what my religious obsessions were. But those are just the tip of the iceberg, and they're so much deeper and more distressing than what I would feel comfortable saying. So when someone has religious OCD, if that person tells you a thought that they're having, chances are it's probably a lot worse. And it's probably been going on for a long time. And so the fact that people can even talk about it now shows just how far they've come, and should be celebrated as an accomplishment. Because for a lot of us, it's taken us years and years and years to get to a point where we can even say our thoughts out loud. Just the benign ones, not even the most horrific ones and personal ones.
Yeah.
So that in itself is a step towards healing, and should be, if you have like religious OCD, if people have that, they should be proud of themselves for getting that far.
I will add on to, if anyone listening thinks that they might have OCD, seeking out counseling that is specialty, OCD or specialized OCD disorders is super, super important. I think that's part of the reason it got missed. Obviously, I didn't go to an OCD specialist originally because I didn't know I had it, but I think that that's part of the reason that therapy was not particularly helpful for me until I found the right therapist. So I think that finding the right therapist and somebody who's licensed, not a religious counselor, is really important too.
I agree, because I had these same struggles with therapists for years, and I was like, why isn't this helping me? When you have OCD, a lot of times talking about your OCD is a compulsion in and of itself.
I was just about to say, I think, like an example of why it's so important is that, I went to talk therapy to seek reassurance from my therapist. I essentially would bring the list, and I wasn't saying, I actually researched this for 13 hours yesterday. I wouldn't say yeah, like this is actually the reason that I haven't like slept in multiple days. I would just go in and say, what do you think about this? And it would really reinforce, I guess, the patterns that I
Mhm.
was having. And so it was like doing the exact opposite. And I was leaving therapy kind of more worked up, or with my OCD thoughts more validated.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. I guilty as charged. I did the exact same thing.
I had a therapist tell me that when I was having anxiety and if I was feeling uncertain, which they say OCD is the doubting disorder. So basically,
Yeah.
all of it, you're uncertain about something. They told me to call a friend and have them verify. So
That's
as,
exactly
as
it's
you can
exactly
imagine,
my son God.
like I called a lot of people every day. Like,
Oh my God.
so
The amount of times that I've texted someone, do you think this food is off? Or do you think this there's a bug on me? Or do you
yes,
think that this or that? The amount of crazy things I've asked people because I was convinced that they were happening
yes, it's
is
yes.
crazy.
So the right help is definitely, yeah, definitely super important.
And also it can really improve your life. A lot of people are like, "Oh, why should I go get help for it? This is just I'm stuck this way forever and nothing will change." It's like, no. Yes, you're always probably going to have anxiety. Yes, you will have bad days. And those will be rough. And you will have really rough patches. It's not going to be smooth sailing. But you don't have to be miserable in your life forever.
Yes.
You don't. Get better. It won't be perfect. You're not going to go to some paradise, but you don't have to be miserable.
Yeah.
That's an important thing I, really want to stress is misery, you don't have to live that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with OCD, it can be challenging too, with it being like the doubting disorder. You can think, a lot of times people will doubt that they have it, even if they've been diagnosed. I actually I got diagnosed and then went to a new therapist to have them also diagnose me, because I was like, well, what if they made a mistake at the first.
I'm laughing because
No, it's relatable. I think that it's very relatable if you have OCD.
I'm laughing because I have OCD about having OCD.
Yeah. Do I really have it? I think I'm just convincing everyone else. But my life definitely did get a lot better once I got the right therapist and on medication too. And I had already done a lot of therapy and different medications, but it was, not the right ones. And so I remember when I even got the diagnosis, I felt like, well, how much could life improve? Because even though the diagnosis is different, I've already worked on this for the last 10 years. But it actually
Yeah.
made a huge difference.
I know for me, it really felt like this is a personality flaw. Only God can fix you. Only prayer and renewal and Jesus can take this away from you because you're stuck like this forever. This is just who you are. But it's not who I am. It's a mental illness. It's something that can be treated and, you know, is not representative of the real me that's behind everything else.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people in these kind of communities make it a personal problem if you're not getting better, or if you're struggling, or if you are depressed or anxious.
Yeah.
And it's not a personal flaw. It's it's just a part of you that you wouldn't criticize someone for having a bad back or a bad knee or a bad heart. So you don't want to criticize people for having mental health issues, and it's so important to really, I think religious OCD specifically is so probably so much more common than anyone knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
that's
think it I
important.
think it often is mislabeled, and like we both kind of said, you think your thought processes are you handling your anxiety, like the
Yeah.
compulsions. It's just you making it better, or you think that it's normal because it is validated by people around you, especially the religious OCD. And
Mhm.
so yeah, you know that something's wrong, but you you don't think it's OCD, because, I didn't know either that compulsions could be mental. And most of my compulsions are mental things that I'm doing, not physical. And so I thought OCD was something that would be very physically obvious to other people, because that's, how it's represented in media.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's just a lot of barriers for people to get help.
Yeah, I had a lot of physical compulsions when I was younger, but then when people started commenting on it,
I
I
aged
sort of
out in middle school of like the more physical things. It was like I grew out of them, and I only revert
right,
periods of high stress. I'll still sometimes do some of them from childhood.
same.
Yeah, but only like someone has to die or like it has to be
Yeah,
very stressful. Yeah.
yeah, no, and now mine are pretty much all, they call it, I think it's like pure O, where it's like all mental compulsions pretty much. And so like I could be sitting here and engaging in mental compulsions right now, and no one would know. And it's an invisible disorder a lot of the time. It's not always, but it can be. And that's really important to, you know, say that you're not invalid for not having physical compulsions, but also the physical compulsions are exhausting too. Mental and physical, they're both exhausting, you know. Reading the same sentence over and over and over and over because you think that you're a sinner if you don't is exhausting.
Yes. Well, that was the interview. I'm excited to join you guys back after listening, and I really can't wait to hear what your thoughts are. I know that you guys will love Cheyenne just as much as I did. Like I said, I came off of the phone call feeling like I just spoke to a friend, and you can probably hear in the call I say that I feel very affirmed and validated by what Cheyenne says. There's just not much out there about religious OCD, and there's not a lot out there about people's experience in fundamentalist Christian churches. But think about how prevalent this really is. To Cheyenne's point, I just want to clarify something about OCD, that the intrusive thoughts can be really alarming. Examples of an intrusive thought, like a harm thought, could be, what if I take the blue pen and I stab them in the leg? A person without an OCD brain might have a thought like, I could stab their leg with that pen right now. And then they'd be like, that's weird, I'm tired, move on. Because you know that you're not a violent person. I know that I'm not a violent person. I don't want to hurt anyone. I would never hurt anyone. I would never stab anyone in the leg with a blue pen. But because I had that thought, my OCD brain wants to tell me that it means something. It means that I'm secretly a murderer. It means that maybe I really want to do that deep down and I'm just lying to myself. What if I'm actually like on the verge of being totally out of control as this like maniac killer? And the more that you obsess over the thought and stress out about it, the more value or weight it seems to hold, the more you believe that there is a possibility that you really could stab them with the blue pen, even though the idea of that is horrific to you. Something that's really important to know about OCD is that it attacks themes that are really valuable to you. So people that really, really value their romantic relationships might start having romantic OCD. That's a subtype of OCD. People with people that go to church and really value their faith and their relationship with God might end up having religious OCD. It's you being afraid that you're going to do the bad things, not that you want to do them or that you're likely to do them. Actually, people with OCD are super unlikely to do the things that they're afraid of. They spend an enormous amount of time trying to avoid the things that they're afraid of, myself included. Looking for information on it has been very limited, and finding videos on OCD or interviews, like I found a couple that were like from Soft White Underbelly, and one of them was a clown. And there's nothing else from real people. The rest is like Psych Central interviews. And so if you don't have OCD, I hope that this was interesting to you because there's not a very good representation of it. If you're someone that has kids that have anxiety and whatever, I hope that maybe you would be able to notice this in them. Or maybe you're sitting here and you're looking at yourself and going, this sounds really familiar. I would love nothing more, and I know that I can say for Cheyenne too, that she would love nothing more than for you guys to be able to relate if you can relate, and that this would reach the right people, because it is so hard to find information on this, any sort of online support or anything else like that. So that's all that I have to say for today. Again, thank you so much, Cheyenne. I love talking to you. I just know that the people that are watching this are going to find it impactful and powerful. All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys are interested in being a guest on this show, you can fill out the form that's in the description of my channel. Reach out to me on Instagram. I have about 0 followers on there because I just made it, so feel free to reach out over DM. You actually will probably jump to the top of the list if you do that. Please like this video if you made it this far. Comment if you relate to any of this. And please subscribe to my channel if you found any value in this, or if you would like to see more like this. I do also have a Facebook group created and linked in the description of my channel as well if you guys are interested in joining that. It's a private group, so your posts will stay private, but you are more than welcome to discuss the videos on this channel or topics relating to the videos on this channel. It doesn't have to specifically be about the content, but I would love for you to come over and join that group. It would be awesome to have, a continued conversation over there. I hope you guys have an awesome week.